Bonjour, good morning to everyone, and welcome to l'ANEC, our beautiful headquarters. We moved here 2 years ago, and let me tell you, it's been a very, very inspiring environment. And by the way, we are here in the Balenciaga headquarters, the Kering headquarters on the other side. So welcome, and thank you for accepting our invitation to join us this morning. As you probably know, 10 years ago when we started the transformation of what was PPR at the time into Kering, a luxury group, we put sustainability with a capital S at the heart of the transformation and at the heart of our mission as a luxury group. And in addition of our commitment to the environment, our commitment to the cause of women is the other facet of our corporate responsibility. And this global commitment to the environment and to social responsibility is not a field for competition. It's not a field of what I call corporate individualism or even selfishness. It's a field of collective effort, it's about sharing, and it's about corporate generosity. So back in 2008, we've decided to launch the Kering Foundation to fight violence against women. And at the time, the topic was quite overlooked, but thankfully, it became much more prominent nowadays. Our foundation supports survivors of violence and tries to prevent this universal curse. We act long-term in very close relationship with local NGOs, and we support social entrepreneurs. And of course, on a much regular basis, we launch campaigns to raise awareness on violence against women. Then, since 2011, we've decided to roll out trainings all across the Kering Group for our employees about domestic violence. And we do believe that corporate companies are a unique environment to create a supportive workplace to break the silence on this issue. And more recently, in 2016 and 17, we co-founded with FAS, the Fondation Agir contre l'exclusion, we co-founded a European network of companies to fight against gender-based violence. L'Oréal and Kering joined the network as executive committee member, and I would like to thank Sophie Boissard and Jean-Paul Agon for this. Thank you very much. And of course, many other companies have joined the ride since then, and to mention some of those companies that I think are here with us this morning, we have Carrefour, we have BNP Paribas, we have SNCF, but we have also Elle International, we have, I hope I won't be wrong on the name, Papa Stratos and PPC from Greece, and also NG Benelux. So you see, it's not just France, it's a real European initiatives. And I look forward to expanding this network of companies to fight against gender-based violence. And I'm, of course, very happy to work very closely with FAS and its very dynamic chairman, Gérard Mestrallet. Please, Gérard. The floor is yours.
Good morning, dear François-Henri. Thank you for your words. Dear Sophie Boissard, dear Jean-Paul Agon, dear friends, thank you very much for being here. So first of all, I would like to thank François-Henri for welcoming us in this marvelous place, this magnificent renovated building, which used to be a hospital for children here. This building is at the crossroads of the exceptional history of art and artistic creation. I would like first to congratulate the group Kering and its chairman for its commitments at large, commitment to FAS, our foundation, commitments on this sensitive and difficult subject that is combating violence against women and its interaction, complex interactions with the professional sphere. So mobilizing businesses in the fight against all forms of exclusion is the role of our foundation. It is the vocation of FAS. FAS is a foundation composed exclusively of companies. We were 2,000 at the beginning of the crisis in 2008 and 2009, and today we are 6,000. So there is a growing awareness within the corporate sphere of the increasing number of people in the situation of exclusion. We are working on more than 400 sites and cities in France and abroad, and the number of people benefiting from our actions has been last year close to 400,000 people. So it's very significant. So as I'm greeting also Sophie Boissard and Jean-Paul Ago for their commitment, I am proud to be able to open this morning with François-Henri with such an audience. This is a very good news, an audience of companies to launch the European initiative, SEAS, and the OneInThree Women network in France. So let's not forget that when it comes to this half of our humanity, the women, 1 in 3 women suffers from violence in her life. This is to say that also 1/3 of our female employees, when we meet at work, 30 women during a day, this means that 10 out of them, 10 are victims of violence. On the basis of FAS research and development work, this network must help raising awareness first, and then train, mobilize, and equip small and large companies to respond to this question. Although this violence is often treated by the medias, it is not tackled enough in our companies, even though it impacts health, professional relations, management, productivity. Our business need to be helped and to share the best practices to commit in their rightful place to a cause that does not exclusively belong to the private sphere, as François-Henri explained. Without having to take a stand on domestic violence, it is also a corporate social responsibility to accompany our employees, as well as to find the right tools to make action from the managers, the colleagues, and also the unions. So these two movements, SEAS at the European level and OneInThree Women at the French level, networks, constitute the completion of a fast first mobilization to bring out this new object of social innovation, which is also one of our objectives, as early as 2013. So during the first 5 years, we have been working on this issue, but not without finding the right way. We launched 5 years ago a research and development project at the European level called CARV, which has identified the first good business practices to come to the rescue of these oppressed women in their private life as well as in the workplace. Integrating this fight into its own internal organization, Kering has quickly established itself as a great CARV partner, a pioneer in combating violence against women. And building of our tradition at FAS of disruptive social innovations, it is therefore following the first project that FAS has decided to keep joining forces with Kering and engage other companies in the process. So I would like to thank, therefore, the hundreds of companies and stakeholders here to launch SEAS. SEAS is a baseline, is involved companies against gender-based violence. This experiment will be led in partnership with Pour la Solidarité and Diesis for Belgium, thank you for being here, as well as CSR Hellas for Greece, with several companies that are in this showroom: PPC Renewables, Papa Stratos, SM Art, and NG Benelux. I would like to acknowledge this remarkable commitment to the social research and development with FAS is now developing with 25 European countries. So we are also launching in France the OneInThree Women network with first and foremost the Kering Foundation co-leading the project with FAS. And thank you once more. So committed companies like L'Oréal and Corian are also our ambassadors, so thank you so much, with the support also of BNP Paribas, Carrefour. SNCF is still part of this innovation dynamics, both at national and European level. It is finally the L Foundation, which brings us highly symbolic support. And many thanks also to Publicis for making this amazing logo. So let all these companies be thanked today for their stance, both unprecedented and remarkable. They will formally demonstrate their commitment by signing a charter, we'll do that in a moment, that commits them to raise awareness among their collaborators and their peers on violence against women, and especially domestic violence, as well as to build a safe work environment that allows victims to speak up by supporting them in concrete terms on a daily basis. It is indeed in and through the action of our companies that society can and must also evolve against this unacceptable violence, that our fellow female citizens can find vital support, that our employees' well-being and commitments are rekindled, that our companies can combine productivity and social responsibility, which is absolutely necessary, that the public authorities can invent new partnerships within the framework of the great cause of the presidency that the president and the government are carrying out. Mobilizing our organizations about violence against women is also stating the place and role of the business, the companies within the society. It's also giving a meaning, sense to our economic action in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, and affirming the human value we give to each female employee and to women in general. To discuss this fight, which is also growing into a business issue now, in terms of fundamental rights of human dignity, social contract, and organizational efficiency, I invite now to join me on stage Sophie Boissard, François-Henri Pinault, and Jean-Paul Agon. Please, if you come and sit in the chairs. In view of their exceptional mobilization, bravo. In view of their exceptional mobilization on this complex and in a certain way taboo subject, at a time when I wish to widen the governance of FAS, I want to invite them to be further involved in the development of FAS, which constitutes today the largest network of socially engaged companies across the country. We are also pleased to invite and welcome Jane Pillinger. Please, I invite her up on stage for their presentation. I would like to remind you that Jane Pillinger, an international expert on gender equality and violence against women at work, has advised governments, social partners, and European organizations for implementing policies. Jane also has carried out several studies documenting the evolution of data and policies on violence against women at work, including domestic violence. And finally, Jane has also worked with many large companies in Europe and around the world on issues of gender equality. Jane, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Mesdames, Messieurs, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, it's a delight to be here at the launch of this important network. Just want to start by saying that this launch really marks an important milestone in the road to ending gender-based violence. It builds on the important work already carried out by FAS and the organisations that are represented here today, and it's an ambitious step in creating a new European corporate network. Gender-based violence is a serious abuse of women's rights. 1 in 3 of all women worldwide experience some form of physical, sexual, or other forms of violence during their lifetimes. Domestic violence is the most prevalent form of violence against women. Companies across Europe have taken some important steps to promote gender equality and gender diversity in the workplace, including the ending of sexual harassment. For many, the next step is to take this perhaps quite new, innovative approach to address domestic violence at work and the impact of domestic violence at work. This launch is a reflection of the important link between domestic violence and the whole area of the private life of women and their domestic lives. This interaction between work and family life is important increasingly for companies, and it suggests a much wider reach of the workplace in preventing violence against women. Just to say, I refer to violence against women, although it's important to acknowledge that men also experience violence, domestic violence, but that it's disproportionately women who experience domestic violence, and therefore I refer to women. But it's important to acknowledge that men experience domestic violence from both male and female domestic partners. Domestic violence is likely to be included in the new International Labour Standard of the International Organisation on Violence and Harassment Against Women and Men in the World of Work, that the tripartite partners of the workers, employers and governments will be discussing at the ILO conference in June 2019. It's already an obligation under various United Nations treaties and the Council of Europe Convention on preventing and combating violence against women and domestic violence, the Istanbul Treaty. What these mechanisms include is the role of the private sector in playing an important part in ending violence against women, along with other stakeholders. In addition, some countries have already introduced legislation on domestic violence at work, including the right for women to have paid leave from work. This exists in several European countries. New Zealand just recently, a couple of months ago, introduced legislation giving the right for women to have 10 days paid leave if they experience domestic violence. Domestic violence is a manifestation of how power and control interact with work and how that interacts with private lives. It impacts on every aspect of a woman's life, and one of those dimensions is women's participation in work, and that's the subject of what we're looking at here. It involves physical, sexual, psychological, and economic violence. It's about coercive control and control over women's social interactions and autonomy. If we take, just for example, economic violence, it's one way that that women are often trapped into dependent and violent relationships. It can prevent simply a woman not having the bus fare to get to work. It can prevent the woman having access to resources to buy the clothing that is suitable for work. Domestic violence can have devastating psychological consequences, affecting women's confidence, her ability to leave a violent relationship even, and to sustain meaningful employment. It's a major barrier to gender equality. Surveys show that 30% of employed women are victims of domestic abuse, and up to 40% of workplaces have been impacted. The vast majority of women victims, and indeed perpetrators, say that their work performance and ability to concentrate on work are negatively affected. And workplaces are affected when women take days off work, when they turn up to work late. The workplace may be the only place where an abuser knows where to find a woman, particularly after she's left a violent relationship. The victim and the perpetrator may work in the same workplace. When perpetrators use workplace resources, that could be a mobile phone, the internet, email, to abuse a victim, this not only puts women at risk, it also puts co-workers, employers, and customers at risk. Aside from these risks, work may be the only place where women can have some protection and safety. It can be preventive and a protective role. And the workplace may be a situation where she has a break from a violent situation and can be a place where violence indeed is identified. In addition, the workplace can be an important entry point for addressing behaviours that underpin domestic violence. So when the workplace sets standards of dignity, of respect, of equality, this can have a broader and more rippling effect across the wider society. Today, many companies recognise that there's a strong business case for equality that extends to this spillover of domestic violence at work. It costs employers and the economy in terms of lost productivity, absenteeism, lost jobs. In Europe, it's estimated this costs the GDP of the EU 1.8%. To date, there's been no detailed company surveys in Europe identifying the costs for employers, but surveys in the USA, UK, New Zealand, Australia, and Canada, and Peru have estimated these costs to be very high. So the question for companies is how to make work safe when home is not safe. Often the question is asked, what obligations do we as employers have? And what role can leaders, managers, supervisors, workplace representatives, colleagues play in preventing domestic violence and its impact at work? A further important issue for managers and colleagues and workplace representatives is how they can respond appropriately and empathetically to women showing signs of discomfort. There may be changed behaviour. This might be changes in work performance. It might be that women are distracted, feeling tired, they're unwell, regularly taking time off work. They might have a higher rate of sick leave. They might be arriving at work late on a regular basis. They might be distracted or distressed when a text message arrives. They may be withdrawing from team activities. They may be socialising. They may not be socialising with work colleagues. These are some of the impacts. So what are the range of workplace interventions and supports that can be put in place to identify and prevent domestic violence in a work context? Early intervention is essential if a woman is to have access to support at work and indeed to specialised services. When women leave their jobs because of sustained domestic violence and abuse, they lose their possibility for financial independence. And this is the single most important indicator enabling a woman to leave a violent relationship. Best practice approaches in companies include things like measures to reduce risk through safety planning with a woman, simple adjustments in the workplace. It could be a very simple thing like changing the woman's parking space, giving a photo to the receptionist of an abuser so that they can alert security when a perpetrator arrives in the workplace. And these are some of the signposting information about specialist services enabling women to access domestic violence services and advice, counselling and so on are also important. It might be that the manager has that information, is able to pass that on to a woman. And it might be that a woman is given flexible working hours, she may be given paid or unpaid leave so that she can make necessary adjustments in her life, particularly after leaving a violent relationship. Or it might be that enables her to move her children to a safe place, or indeed to attend court, for example, to get a protection order. Where there is protection from dismissal, and this is really important, particularly to help women, support women to stay in their jobs, this can maintain her source of income. And some companies have gone as far as providing financial support to women, such as advance payment of salaries or financial assistance in moving or seeking safe accommodation. One of the manifestations of economic abuse is often that women are left with debts and have no money. So actually leaving a violent relationship is sometimes impossible because her economic resources are also controlled. Having designated trusted, trained workplace representatives, workplace advocates, persons of trust can also be important in giving victims confidential advice to help them, perhaps as a first stage, to disclose domestic violence. Bystander approaches can also be useful in helping colleagues and managers, workplace representatives and colleagues to know how to intervene, to give confidential support. Finally, no one is expecting companies to solve the problem of domestic violence. But what we can expect of companies is that they play their role along with other stakeholders in contributing their part in a wider societal approach to ending violence against women. This is the challenge facing companies, and if tackled effectively, can contribute to the integrated and coordinated approaches that are advocated in the Istanbul Convention, for example, to ending violence against women. Thank you very much. I'm now moving to... Is this working? That works? So, I'm delighted to be here on a panel with such distinguished people from companies across Europe. And it's particularly important to see the commitments that you're making through the CEASE programme and also in your gender equality commitments. What I'm going to do is ask you a few questions to find out a little bit more about the work that you've been involved in and your priorities. And I'm going to start with Sophie Bozard. Madame Bozard is the CEO of Kering and the chairman of the Kering Foundation. I'd like to start by asking you, Madame Bozard, as a company that is beginning to prioritise this issue, could you tell us a bit more about why Kering has taken steps to address the impact of domestic violence on employees and on the company?
Yeah, thank you for this question. I would say my personal belief, or I'm really personally strongly convicted that Kering fighting against violence against women is actually part of our mission. Why? Because we are a care company. Our aim is to provide or to contribute to quality of life. Of course, quality of life for the patient and resident that we have to take care of, but of course also quality of life of our caregivers, our staff. Why? Because taking care of those who take care actually help them to provide good care to the patient and resident. And as a women company, we are a women company, 82% of our employees are actually women. We know perfectly well that some of them, you've quoted some figures, are exposed to domestic violence. So that's why we have decided to tackle the issue together with our trade unions. 2 years ago, we've put in place some support internally. We have, of course, a network of social workers that are there in order to listen and to bring some some solution when they have detected victims. Housing solution with selected partners, Action Logement, financial solutions together with our insurer company, Malakoff Médéric, which is also a shareholder of the company. So we've put in place a various range of solutions internally for victims. But now my aim is really to contribute, and this is why we have decided, we are very happy to join the network OneInThree today. We have to contribute to collective awareness in order to be much stronger on prevention. And that's why I think being actually able to talk about the issue and to say, this happened, and you can help your colleagues, you are entitled to speak, I think will help in the future to fight against this issue.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jean-Paul Lagon, Chairman and CEO of L'Oréal and Chairman of the L'Oréal Foundation. L'Oréal has a very strong reputation as being one of the world's leading companies in gender diversity. How are you planning to take this next step to address domestic violence at work?
Thank you for inviting us this morning. First, it's true that L'Oréal has done a lot for gender equality, and we have been recognized last year as the #1 company in the world for gender equality, and this year again #1 European company. But it's true that, and I really thank FAS and Kering for opening our eyes on this subject. It's true that it's I think it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer as a next step that we have to undertake. It's what you have described is really terrible. These numbers are terrible, and we are also a very woman company with 70% of our employees being women. So we think that it's absolutely the right thing to do now. And how are we going to do it? First, we are going to participate in the OneInThree Women research study that is going to be launched, and I think that you are conducting. So I think it's going to be very important, because after all, we don't know that much about it. So every more research on it will be very precious. And also the most obvious thing to do is, as you said, both of you, is to raise awareness and training across the company. And we are going to do that across L'Oréal very, very soon. And I think that we will also try to be creative also and to bring other ideas, because it's obviously a major, #1, a major problem, and #2, as you said very rightly, a problem on which companies can really have an impact. It's obvious that we can change or contribute to change things, so we are really committed to do it.
Excellent, thank you very much. And Monsieur Gérard Mesterlet, Chairman of FAS, I'd like to ask you, what are the strategic or other reasons that FAS has prioritized this work with companies and in this area?
Thank you. You know, FAS is a foundation reconnue d'utilité publique with a public interest. So our aim is to fight against exclusion by using some tools in the field of social innovation. And also we are developing and implementing corporate social responsibility within our members, and 6,000 members. So the women victims of violence are more and more victims of exclusion. That was our objective. FAS has been working for 20 years for gender equality, but view from the corporate, gender equality has meant first professional equality or remuneration equality. And the question of violence is much recent. We realized progressively that the victims of violence were victims of exclusion. By a progressive phenomenon, the women victims of violence started to not to see their families, their parents, their sisters, their brothers. They were not taking their children to school, not going shopping. And it appeared more and more that finally the workplace was one of the places where something had to be done to accompany them, to help them. So FAS has been some years ago started by sponsoring some maisons d'accueil created by municipalities, but that was not really the solution. We wanted first to know better the phenomenon And so we have created the CARV at the European level, R&D, research and development to know better the phenomenon, try to measure it, and therefore also to collect some good experiences from companies. That was the first move we made. It happened clearly that even if many companies were considering that was out of their scope, that was a private sphere, and that companies should not go into that private sphere. But more and more, it happened that doing nothing was meaning and morally a failure to assist a person in danger. And so we are very grateful to Kering to have taken this initiative to go one step, 2 steps, or 3 steps further, and to create the movement. A last word. Of course, the violence against women has a personal impact, which can be absolutely dramatic on the women. But it has also an economic impact. And in the charter, we mentioned a study showing that at the European level, the negative economic impact represents 250 billion euros. And for France, it should be 15 billion euros. So for all these reasons, FAS had to participate to this movement.
Thank you very much. And I just want to ask a question to Monsieur François-Henri Pinault, who is the Chairman and CEO of Kering and Chairman of the Kering Foundation. My question to you is, what would you say to other companies about why they should take the issue of domestic violence as an important issue in their company strategies?
Well, I don't know if I can convince everyone to take that as a key mission for the company, but when it comes to Kering, why we did that 10 years ago, well, as I mentioned, we were transforming the company, and I have two deep conviction as a CEO of a company is that I cannot conceive a company without a mission, a purpose that goes much beyond the economical sphere. Mm-hmm. That's for me very important. And the second conviction is that this commitment has to be relevant to who you are as a corporation. Mm-hmm. Because if you want to make a difference, it has to resonate with who you are. So back 10 years ago, we were transforming the group into a luxury group, and not as to the extent of Korian of L'Oréal, but we were becoming very much women-centric. We have 60% of our workforce are females, and more importantly, a vast majority of our customers are women. So that was one component. And the other component is much more personal, but it also lies into personal convictions too. So in 2006, through my wife, who is very committed to that cause, I met Eve Ensler in New York. Eve Ensler is the writer of the monologue of the vagina. And I discovered the reality of violence on women. I was not aware of the reality of that phenomenon, which is across social classes, across geographies, across culture. And thinking of that, the transformation on one side, the reality of this phenomenon, and the fact that at that time, as I mentioned, it was much more an environment of silence around that, saying that even a corporation like us, we're not that big, we could make a difference. So it became obvious for me that that would be the cause of Kering. As simple as that.
Thank you. Just very, very briefly, I'm going to ask, because we're behind time a little bit, just very briefly, Sophie Bozard, what would you say to other companies that are thinking about taking this priority in company strategies in the future?
I would say two things. First things, don't be afraid. And I think you've mentioned something very important, that companies are not responsible for domestic violence. This is very true. But tackling the issue and actually opening the doors and just enabling people to realize what's happening and to discuss and see how they can help locally, this is very important. And this is what is actually expected from the company. So don't be afraid. This is not an issue that you will be seen as responsible for it, but you can really make the difference. This is first thing. And second, and I would say that the most important is just to create places where people can speak and express themselves, not being ashamed. And we've started this in Italy with our Italian subsidiary, with a movement that was called Dire, so just talk, say. And actually, we've already seen how much this can change, that people in their work environment feel entitled just to speak and to give some signs, and then you can start to help or to prevent, really to make things different.
Thank you. Monsieur Mestrellet, what would you like to see the OneInThree network achieving?
First of all, I would like to say a few words on the two companies been involved in NG and Suez. We have only 30% of female employees. Nevertheless, we have 60% of our board members who are women, and we are the only one company of the CAC 40 to have a woman as a CEO. Now, answering your question, I consider that it is a strength for the companies to act in networks. I'm totally convinced that coalitions, groups, networks of companies really committed increases their capacity to make things change. And so already today, the companies member of the networks represents 1 million employees. So that's really a lot, but it's not enough. And I hope that with the models that you three represent, there will be more and more companies to join the movement. And it is very important also for your employees and the employees of the company to be proud of belonging to a company which is involved in such a cause, a very important cause. And having this role of model will also increase the speed of the movement. And therefore, my objective, my hope, is that after this launch today in these marvelous buildings and with such a nice audience, we will increase the strength and the impact of the movement.
Thank you. Monsieur Hagon. Looking ahead, what do you think will be the benefit for you in L'Oréal by having a focus on domestic violence at work?
Honestly, I don't think it's a question of benefit first, at least. First, I think it's a question of duty. I mean, it's just the right thing to do, and it's true that what you have described is in fact, is an eye-opener, and we realize that we just have to do it again because we have, we made a lot of progress in terms of ethics, in terms of human rights, but this is a very fundamental element of ethics and human rights. So I think that we have to do it, and I think the benefits will just be that I think that the women working at L'Oréal, I think, will be grateful because, as you said, if the statistics are so terrible, if 30% of women are suffering from domestic violence, definitely among the thousands of women at L'Oréal, there must be many who are suffering. So we're going to help, and it's going to create a move within the company that will definitely be positive. But we will also help definitely to make other companies commit and engage in this great cause. It shouldn't be too difficult, so you can count on us.
Thank you very much. And finally, Monsieur Pinault, based on the learning of all of the work that you've done, the excellent work you've done in the Kering Foundation over many years, what would you like to see? Oh, are you okay?
Careful.
Oh. What would you like to see the OneInThree network achieving?
Well, based on our experience, but we keep on learning, even though we started some years ago, and I don't want to give any lessons to people, but on the pragmatic side and based on our experience, it's very important to be very inclusive and particularly to have male involved on that cause. So that's one thing. And being inclusive means also, when it comes to cooperation, start from the top. We were talking about trainings on domestic violence that we rolled out. We started by our executive committee. I asked my executive committee to be trained. So we've been trained, and I asked all the brands, and Cedric for Balenciaga is here, all the executive committees of all the brands inside Kering have been trained on domestic violence, and of course, we expand the program to all employees. And the second advice would be to be, when you roll out that type of thing, you need to be very cautious on the local, at local level. It's been very, very important for us to work with local NGOs to specialize in that topic. You mentioned Dire. We work with Dire in Italy. We work with FNSF in France. We work with Women's Aid in the UK or NNEDV in America. So very important because when it comes to help survivors, when it comes to raise awareness, there is localization that are very important to understand before moving forward. So that would be my two elements of advice.
Thank you very much to everybody. And I want to pass over to Monsieur Mescalet to just say a few closing remarks on the panel, and then you'll be invited to sign the charter. Thank you very much to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to congratulate and thank you for this extraordinary morning of mobilization among companies combating violence against women. Like any committed business executive, I was obviously convinced by this indispensable fight when I arrived this morning. However, I must tell you that this is a very difficult, intimate, and sensitive subject. But your testimonies, your commitments, your enthusiasm enlightened me and definitely convinced me that we had to go further with all of you within our companies, respective companies. And so siège and OneInThree Women are now launched in France and Europe. This is the greatest proof of fast public utility, public interest. OneInThree Women is everyone's business today. OneInThree Women will be confronted with domestic, sexist, or sexual violence. And OneInThree Women may be your office neighbor, maybe that anonymous colleague you run into in the coffee machine. It may be a friend, maybe a sister who is isolated for their partner. So yes, some companies here present want and know how to commit to the French great cause of the presidency, the gender equality. Yes, we want and will be able to respond concretely to the expectations of the European Commission, who has already declared 2017 European Year for Combating Violence Against Women and Girls, with its No communication campaign that perhaps you've seen, and which will last under the end of this year. So this morning is the first step of a large-scale gearing. I have no doubt that you will encourage several partners in your value chain and your territorial ecosystem to rally. You know what place I give to women inside companies, what we did at NG, Suez, and now FAS. And I wish for our companies and our country to be more exemplary. All European countries must seize the subject. This universal cause even calls for a form of global mobilization. I will not fail to mention it by saluting in a few days in Tunis, outstanding career path of women entrepreneurs with the NG Foundation and our FAS Tunisia club. It's also another dimension that I integrate into the mission entrusted to me by the President of the Republic in Saudi Arabia, and you know how difficult it is today to work in this country. Nevertheless, I will try to go on. Whatever the difficulty in adapting each local context, we must rally all of us and everywhere. At the European level, today, 5 countries are involved, more particularly on the subject: Belgium, well represented today, Bulgaria, Spain, Greece, and France. All the specialized non-profit organizations, the European organizations, and the big international companies must take ownership of the process and initiate such a dynamic in each country of the Union. I consider that it is through action and on a large scale that we can only respond to the needs of women, affirm a humanist and egalitarian conception of the business, of the company, as generating lasting cultural change in our societies. We will continue in this sense to work undertaken through a new European project, which we will file into our Belgian partners to the EU, European Commission, and in which we want to experiment with a cross and compare approach of personalized support for companies that are mobilized on their own territories. Within your companies, join us in this tremendous dynamic of societal mobilization, serving women who are victims of violence. But let it be said that SEAS and the OneInThree Women are made for all our fellow citizens, men and women. These new networks, coalitions, are serving a real social project. Equality and dignity are in fact not reducible, and together let's be active in upholding these republican principles as the founders of our civilizations. So, to end, the company of tomorrow must not be 1 in 3 women, but 0 in 3 women. Thank you. You have to sign here.
Parfait. Super. Allez, j'y vais. Alors. Merci.
Merci.
Alors, allez. Oui. Voilà.
C'est bon, bravo. Allez, on fait une petite photo.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Now I want to invite the following representatives of the OneInThree network to come on the stage when the photos are finished and sign the charter. So I'm going to invite the following representatives from the OneInThree network to now come onto the stage and sign the charter. Constance Banquet, General Manager of L and L Foundation, President of the L Foundation. Sign, yes. And Constance will also say a few words.
Good morning. I'm here not only as the chairman of the L Foundation, but also as the CEO of Lagardère News and the L brand. In Lagardère, we have more than 66% women employed in our company. And linked to the statistics known on violence against women in our country, I can say many of them are certainly concerned by this issue. Unfortunately, we are used to hearing that violence against women is a personal issue, and that domestic violence is not a subject of workplace. As a woman, as a mother of daughters, as a citizen, I do think that we are all really concerned and responsible. As chairman, I will really do my best in my company to develop activities that address this serious question as really a priority for our company. We are very proud to support the OneInThree initiative, and I would like to thank you very much, Faith Foundation, and all the company involved in this event. We are really very pleased to work all together, and I hope we will find efficient solutions system which will protect the victims and help them to find a new path and a real new life. Thank you very much.
I'd now like to invite Ikavos. Thank you very much. Ikavos Karagotos from Greece. Hello, good morning. We'd like to also say a few words, and he's the Vice Chairman of Papastratos.
Papastratos, thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you all for being here today. It is my honor to sign this commitment charter on behalf of Papastratos and be part of SEAS. We truly believe that as a company we have a responsibility and a key role to play. That is why for years now we have been actively involved in a series of initiatives within our working environment as well as beyond. By supporting safe houses for abused women and their children, by engaging with NGO Diotima to increase awareness on gender-based violence and to provide legal aid to victims. At the same time, we try to take good care of our own. Our corporate culture celebrates women as an integral part of its existence and not as a special case. For us, gender discrimination is in fact another manifestation of abuse, and we can address such attitudes radically before they become a reality through a confidential stream of support mechanisms. Is what we are doing enough? Is it satisfactory? Probably not. However, it is definitely a good starting point to move forward. I am confident that SEAS will help all of us to move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to invite Stella Kovloka, CEO of PPC Renewables, who'd also like to say a few words. Thank you, Stella. Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning from me. I'm very pleased to be here. I represent the Public Power Corporation Renewables. We are a subsidiary of the Public Power Corporation, the Greek EDF. Within the next few days, our the chairman and the CEO of Public Power Corporation will also sign this commitment. I'm very pleased, and I promise we will do the best to implement the concept and the essence of this charter. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'd like to invite Caroline Cotin from BNP Paribas, Mathilde Thébery, who is from Carrefour, and Catherine Woneroff-Algo, who is from SNCF. Jacques Spelkens is not here. And also Laetitia Deschamps, who is the HR manager from Smart. Caroline Cotin is head of diversity at BNP Paribas. And she represents the Chief Executive Officer of BNP Paribas, Laurent Bonnefay, who's unable to be here but has already signed the charter. Mathilde Thébery from Carrefour Social Development and Diversity Director. As I mentioned, Laetitia is head of HR manager for Smart. So thank you very much, everybody, for signing the charter, and I'm sure many more companies are now going to be signing the charter across Europe. It's a great moment to see such a commitment from companies across France, from Belgium, from Greece, and from a much wider reach in the future.